So, all right. And welcome to Your Next Big Thing, the podcast where we talk about Gen X careers, where we're headed as we enter into the next phase of professional lives, and hopefully have a little bit of fun while we're at it. We want to welcome you to our podcast where we'll dig into topics that matter to us in our mid to late careers, finding your next big gig, helping build your network, refining your job search, maybe even starting your own business. Basically, what is your next big thing? And I'm joined today by my co-host, Chad Everhart, as
Hoop,
well
hoop.
as our distinguished guest, Mr. Andy Cohen. Gentlemen, how are you folks doing today?
Doing great.
Living the dream, Berto. Glad to have Andy on board today. So we're looking forward to some exciting insights from Andy. So thanks for joining us today, Andy. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Truth be told, this is the first one of these things I've ever done. So we'll see.
All
He'll
right.
be outstanding. I'm sure you're a Hollywood guy. He'll be fine.
Okay, let's get things started. So this week we're going to dive into a topic of starting your own business, and more specifically around buying into an existing franchise. And so this is something that's been a personal interest to me for the past decade or so, as I've explored a number of different franchise opportunities, primarily focused around the health and wellness space, which is, where I spent most of my career. But I believe this topic is more relevant than ever, given the large number of corporate jobs that are being displaced by AI. And people are now scrambling to find alternative business options, later in their careers, outside of the corporate world. So with that being said, let me introduce you to today's guest, Andy Cohen. Andy and I go back almost 30 years to the good old business school days at Pepperdine University in beautiful Malibu, California. Go Waves. In fact, we still kind of joke that I think we were the first person that both of us met on day one of orientation, which is pretty funny that, we've still maintained our friendship, 30 years later on that. So that's great. But after business school, Andy spent the majority of his career in the entertainment industry, working for such companies as Sony Pictures and Warner Brothers in their home video departments. And it was only about 10 years ago that he made the decision to move on from Hollywood and buy into an existing franchise business called Right at Home, which provides in-home care and assistance to the sick and elderly population. But because of his experience, I thought he'd be an ideal guest for today's show. So welcome, Andy.
Thank you.
And would you like to introduce yourself and maybe give everyone a little background in yourself, your career, and kind of what led you to where you are today?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for the intro. And it is hard to believe you are the first person I met 30 years ago. Yeah. I mean, like a lot of people, after school, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and Warner Brothers came calling, and I felt it was a good opportunity to get in with a good corporation, a name brand corporation. I always liked entertainment. And so it kind of, I ended up staying at Warner Brothers for about 7 years, then went to Sony Pictures for 3 years, then went back to Warner Brothers. So I kind of zigzagged around a little bit, like a lot of people do. Oh, there's a opportunity for a promotion here, a little bit of a higher level. I'm going to go to Sony. And then with some fortune and luck, I was able to go back to Warner Brothers because there was an opening. I ended up kind of leading the trade marketing, retail marketing team that I used to be on, and ended up leading kind of that whole group and division. So yeah, as the years went by, home entertainment really morphed. When I started, believe it or not, one of my first meetings was with Netflix when they were doing the mail-in movies for that red envelope. That's how old I am, right? And look at them now, but they started like that, right? And that shows you how it evolved. And so a lot of the stuff at Warner Brothers and Sony was in like the physical media, DVDs and later on Blu-rays. Then it kind of morphed into digital. After 16 years total between those two, I thought to myself, what is something else I can do? I don't know how many more opportunities I'll get to get another jump in corporate. I've been in corporate so long, and what is something I could do that has meaning, where I can really actually help people? And I started thinking about it and doing some research. And my father and brother are both physicians, and so I kind of grew up in that healthcare world a little bit. I said, okay, so what's something I can do? I'm not going to go to medical school. I didn't have the aptitude for that. So what's something I can do to circle back around to helping people? And I started doing research, and I started looking at franchises. I was looking non-franchises, but I really gravitated towards franchises because of what they can offer, right? That you get the support of the franchise. And I thought as a first-time business owner, that would be very helpful to me. And then I started thinking, okay, well, franchise, what sector do you want to go into? Do I want to go into, obviously I was gravitating towards healthcare because of my background, but I was looking at different things as well at the time. I remember I was looking at a concept called pizza in a cone. Pizza in a cone. That was a franchise back. This is 10 years ago. I don't know if it's around anymore. I remember my wife telling me, you know what? I think going into home care is a little bit more meaningful, and who knows how long it'll last for. So I started doing research, started looking at different franchises. And Right at Home was kind of the top of the list. I mean, my friend giving a coworker gave me a Forbes listing of the top franchises, and Right at Home was like right up there. So I reached out to them, developed a relationship with them. All the time, I'm at Warner Brothers this whole time, right? So I'm keeping my job, doing research on the side, figuring it out. And, one thing led to another, led to another, led to another. And then at one point, they said, hey, you're great. Why don't you come out and meet the corporate team? And at first, it was going to be a startup business. And so, just to be clear for people listening, when you're a franchise, you can do a startup that's like brand new, or you can buy an existing business called a resale. And so, when I was first looking at it, I'm like, you know what? I don't know. I don't know anything. I'll do a startup. And they told me the areas that were available. I started doing some research. I'm like, you know what? I don't think I can leave my job at Warner Brothers, the security of that for a startup where there's no guarantee of anything. There's no cash, there's no clients, there's no caregivers, there's nothing. So it's a bigger risk. And then they came back to me. I said, no go on that. Well, what about buying an existing business? So luck would have it, they reached out to me. An opportunity opened up here in Rancho Cucamonga, and it was a very mature business. The sellers were selling because there were some health reasons going on with their family. And a lot of times, if you buy a resale, there's a reason it's a resale. Maybe it's not a good business, they want to get out. This was actually a good, solid business. And so I started pursuing that. And then it became easier to leave my corporate job at Warner Brothers for this because I knew, okay, even though it's more expensive, you're buying a resale, it's way more expensive than a startup. You're getting the infrastructure, you're getting the families, you're getting the caregivers, you're getting that cash flow already, right? You have business. The marketing salesperson that's still with me was totally embedded in the community already. He knew everybody out there. So it really became an easier decision for me to leave Warner Brothers, which was difficult to do it for a resale in a franchise. So if you think of it like this, what's the safest thing to do in business if you're looking at it holistically? Resale franchise. What's the least safe thing to do? Non-franchise startup. Think of it like that. Non-franchise startup, on your own. Or you can do a startup franchise. Okay, I got to do it, but I got the support. Or you can do what I did, right? And so it was the safest thing to do, and it was a good, solid business. And that was really what spurred me to leave Warner Brothers, which was difficult. But also at the time, I mean, I was aging up there at Warner Brothers, and there's people younger than me, and there were technologies that I probably wasn't as well versed in. And so I wouldn't say I was, I think that my time was probably limited at Warner Brothers at one point. There was probably a shelf life for it. Very few can keep rising to the top, to the top, to the top, to the top of corporate. So I saw an opening and I went for it. And it's the best thing I've ever done. So that's kind of my background intro of kind of how I got from business school into the entertainment industry and then over to the business side.
No, that's great. I mean, that makes absolute sense. And so, thanks. I think that's a really good overview. You actually knocked off a couple of my questions right off the get-go on that. So I'll have to check those off already. Perfect overview on it. But kind of as we kind of kick things off here, kind of dovetailing on something that you talked about, because you are, obviously mentioning the franchises, and I think you outlined a little bit of the structure of the franchise, but maybe for somebody that's not familiar with the franchise business, I mean, obviously I know that you're picking up the name and the general operating procedures and so forth, but what are kind of any of the pros, or I guess starting off with, what's the for somebody from like 101 franchising 101, what is the relationship between you and, either the master brand or the company, if you will?
Well, to answer that question, I would say it really depends on the type of franchise and the type of sector and industry you're in. To answer that question, so the relationship, if you run a Subway franchise, for example, you are going to be beholden to exactly the policies and procedures of the franchisor. Okay, Subway corporate office. They say there's a new sandwich coming down the pike, and it's got to be priced at this. You have to have the new sandwich. You have to have the slices exactly the same, the weight, and it's got to be priced at this. And how are you going to pay your employees? You got to pay them this. Well, based on state law. So there's a lot of connection between the franchisor and the franchisee. In home care, it's very different. they allow the businesses to operate pretty freely because think about it. What are we doing? We're helping seniors and adults with disabilities. And we're on the ground in the trenches with them. That can't be governed or managed by a system-wide process because people are different. Families are different. Needs are different. So one of the things that appealed to me was I did not want a lot of oversight from the franchisor. They allow us the independence. I will say that yes, there are trademarks. I can't use right at home in different ways. There's policies and procedures around the brand, the name, the likeness, and all that. But if I want to bill a certain rate to a family, if I want to pay what I pay, I don't have to. I can do it. If we want to market in a certain area, if we want to run an ad on this, or we want to sponsor a golf event, we can do it. The relationship is you pay royalties. So whatever the franchise is, whatever sector you are paying a percent royalties off the gross revenue to the franchisor. That is across all franchises, all sectors. Now they might vary on the percentage, right? But you're always paying it. And that's part of the deal for getting the support. And what I say by support, well, corporate has all these marketing materials that we could go into. Say we want to do a flyer for something. Say we want to present something to a hospital. They might have a template for us to use to go in there to present a certain thing, and then we can change the template based on the local need. So there's a bunch of marketing materials and resources. There's webinars all the time, every week on different subjects such as caregiver retention, the best recruiting, applicant tracking things to get applicants in. There's all these things on the best way to approach a difficult conversation with a client or a caregiver, or the best way to answer a phone when a client calls. So there's all these resources that are available. So it's perfect because they don't manage at all, micromanage, don't manage. In fact, there's legal boundaries to how much they can dictate and manage because they can be liable. They can have legal consequences if they say something to me about my business and then something happens, they could be liable for it actually. So, so you get the resources and you get that, but really they let us own and operate the way we want to operate. So to answer your question, Rob, it really depends. Fast food, it's micromanaged. Everything has to be pretty much exact to a T. The opposite end of the spectrum is this in home care where it does not, right? Because they need to allow us to help the families on the ground in the trenches. So, yeah, that's why I love it too, right? Again, part of the reason getting out of corporate is I don't want a boss anymore, right? In your corporate, it's like, I'm my own boss. Who wants to have a boss? One of the many advantages to this. So yeah, that's
No, but
why it's great.
correct me if I'm wrong, because like one of the nice things about this, obviously, you have an MBA, you come from a business background, you have a very kind of a structured, formal background as well. Listening to what you're saying, kind of like what I understand, about, a franchise as well. One of the nice things is that maybe for somebody coming in that doesn't have a full background, a business background or an MBA, and understand all the intricacies of running a business, using a franchise model gives you guardrails. It gives you structure going into it to be able to know at least a framework in terms of how to run your business. Kind of, I don't want to say a checklist, but things to go down to at least get you up and going until you understand the business better. That's been one of the key things that I've understood, or when I've talked to people about franchises. Would you kind of agree with that? Is that kind of your take on it as well? Or
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, they have a person called a right start manager. So say you're a new owner coming in, say it's a startup or even a resale, but say you're a startup and you don't have a lot of experience, you don't have the formal business background, but you've been doing something else, but you want to take a chance on that. They have someone at corporate to work with you every step of the way. It's called a right start manager. You go out there and you train in the corporate office for 2 weeks and you learn the ins and outs of home care. And they'll tell you all about, okay, referral sources. Okay, how does it work with hospitals and caseworkers? And then how does it work with, if you're going into a meeting with someone, what are the things to say? You do these scenarios. You do actually practice scenarios, right? With talking to these referral sources, for example. But you have one dedicated person to help you along the way with that. And I think that is very comforting. That can be very comforting to someone that doesn't have, it was comforting to me. I didn't have any background in home care. I knew nothing. And even though I had an MBA, even though it was a resale, I was like, it was a steep learning curve. I needed that support. I needed someone to help me with that every step of the way. Not to mention also just setting up the systems. So there are proprietary systems internally that you do have to use as part of Right at Home. And that's something there are guidelines to certain things that we have to use internally. And so they help you set up with that, right? And so, yeah, there is a lot of support for sure. And I think it is, you use the word guardrail. It is a good safe thing to do. That gives you those guardrails to allow you to gain the confidence and allow you to have the time to learn like the business.
That's it. Chad, why don't I
Andy,
flip it over to here?
yeah, I got, this really kind of, because you were in the Hollywood industry and I was as well up there in LA, kind of similar time frame. What really kind of is the question in my mind is what allowed you, I touched on this briefly, but what allowed you to walk away from Warner Brothers, big brand, big entertainment company? Sounds like you had a pretty solid opportunity there. Was there an aha moment in the pitch from the current company you're at where you could see the numbers make sense, where you could see the lifestyle make sense? Like can you take us back to that period of time, however many years ago, and kind of
Yeah.
just tell us what was going on and how much
Yeah.
thought you put into it?
Sure. It was a very, first of all, I would say the total time frame was about 9 months from the time I first contacted the franchise to the time I actually took over the business. That's 9 months, 3/4 of a year. And I would say that there were several aha moments. One was going out and visiting the corporate office and meeting the people, meeting the team. It's called Discovery Day. The reason I call it Discovery Day is you're discovering all about this opportunity. They take you out to, this is in Omaha, Nebraska is the headquarters. They take you out to a nice steak dinner, Omaha, right? Having steak, schmoozing, you meeting the people, having a glass of wine, feeling good. And then the next day you meet with a bunch of different people and they start talking about right at home and what they do and what the mission is. And by the way, they're evaluating you as well. They want to make sure you're the right fit, right? It's kind of a
Sure.
two-way street. So I think the first aha moment was coming away from that day, Discovery Day, being like, this feels really good. This culture feels really good. I like these people, right? And then, but that's sort of the beginning of the process. And then as it goes along, what happens is, okay, in this case, it was a resale opportunity. I met with the people, so husband and wife, I met with them a couple times. And then the first time I met with them, again, we're checking each other out. I'm seeing what they're like. They're seeing, is this someone that I can leave my business to, right? Because they had really built it up and they wanted to sell it to someone that they felt could continue on, right, that legacy. And then the second time I met with them, they shared some of the financials, and
Oh, wow.
I looked at the financials as part of the due diligence. You look at tax
Sure.
returns back 3 years, right? You look at P&Ls, and I started kind of looking at it, and I'm like, okay, well, it is going to cost a lot. It's a pretty big nut. It's going to cost a lot, but if I can do it, this is what I'm getting. It's pretty clear what I'm getting. Okay, now you start comparing it to what you're making, right? And then you start thinking, okay, well, not only that, but like the freedoms then protect, because they were talking about, okay, they voted for a number, and they have the team to do it. And this is how much they work. And, they don't work on Fridays. They can leave at 2 o'clock and all that kind of stuff. And so the whole lifestyle thing in there. So I think the second aha moment was really that second meeting, both meetings with them where I was like, you kind of see what it looked like. And I think at that point, I'm like, if I can do it, I want to do this. But I waited until I had to get an SBA loan. I had to get an SBA loan to purchase the bulk of the business. So that had to be approved, the SBA loan. So I remember like once that got approved, which now we're talking 9 months, this is now 6 months later, right?
Right.
That SBA got approved. That's when I'm like, you know what? I mean, I'm going to do this. I walked into my boss's office the next day and she was shocked. And you got to understand, I'm giving up severance, right? I mean, you're giving up a
Yeah.
lot. I'd been there a long time. You're giving up. It's hard to walk away, but there's also something empowering about doing something on your terms.
Absolutely.
And I felt, and it was a hard conversation to have, but the train had moved on the tracks far enough where I had to say something. So I hope that answers your question. There were a couple aha moments in there. And then the final approval of the loan was kind of the moment where I'm like, I could actually do this. Because if the loan didn't get approved, well, okay, how am I gonna fund this, right? And so
Right.
those are some of those key moments. I'm probably missing some moments, but those are some of the key moments.
Yeah, it's really interesting because some people think that people just fall into stuff, and like you said, it was almost a full year of contemplating, and then getting to the point where you mentioned culture a couple times, or the feel of that you got at corporate as well as the people you were buying the franchise from. So I think
Yeah,
that's, for me,
yeah,
that's something that's always true, is like, what's the team that I'm joining? And what's the cause that I'm part of, or the group? So
no,
that's
for sure.
very insightful. So appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, for sure. Culture is such a huge thing. I'll just say, I'm dealing with it. I think Rob, you had a question later on. just purchased another one, another franchise within, not same franchise, another business within it. Very different culture within two offices. So interesting. And we'll probably get to that. I don't want to jump ahead, but you talked about culture. So that reminded me.
No, I think there's no set format to this. So if we're talking about it right now, so one of my questions was going to be, because I know that you've owned this location for 10 years, if I'm not mistaken, and then recently you've purchased. Is this your second or is this your third location that you've just purchased now?
So my original one 10 years ago was one franchise, but two territories. So you purchase
Okay.
territories. So when I bought it, I bought two territories under one business entity. And then I just bought another business within right at home. And it's an additional two territories. So I own four territories, but two different businesses. Each business has two different territories. And so, yeah, go ahead.
And kind of what I was gonna say, what kind of led you? I mean, after 10 years now, because obviously, the business is up and running, and from everything that I understand from all of our conversations, everything's going smoothly on it. Kind of what was the impetus for you that made the decision, okay, taking that next step and actually kind of, doubling down and going all in on this?
Yeah. Another kind of difficult decision, kind of one of those things in life where you're like, okay, I'm really comfortable, right? I like have everything set. I'm working 10 hours a week, even less than that, honestly. Everything is good. Everything is good. And I got two little boys at home, by the way, 4 and 6, but there's a lot on my plate right now. And do I have the bandwidth to do this? But and so maybe there's a reason it was 10 years because there were other opportunities that did come up within the 10 years.
Yeah.
It wasn't the right opportunity. This was the right opportunity. So at Home Improvement, that's our yearly conference. The person that eventually sold me this business talked to me and said, this is a year ago, said, would you be interested in potentially expanding? I said, yeah, if it's the right thing. If you're in a franchise, how do you grow? Most common way to grow is by purchasing other territories. That's the most common.
Right.
You can grow internally for sure, which you always want to be doing, but that's the quickest way to do it. So when she started talking to me, I said, yeah, I'm definitely interested. And then kind of like 10 years ago, I was just explaining to Chad from his question, but what was the process for that? That was a whole process too. Instead of 9 months, maybe that was a 6-month process. And so it's doing the due diligence. It's looking at the financials. It's thinking about, can I do this? Can I pull this off with my life? Do I have the bandwidth to do this? And then it was the right opportunity. The reason it was the right opportunity, I live in Glendale. This is Pasadena and Covina. So if you think about it like this, anyone listening familiar with Southern California, my office is in Rancho. My territory goes from San Bernardino to San Dimas. That's my original one. This goes from Glendora to La Cañada. So all the way, and I live in Glendale. So I'm like, hey, this is great. This is actually closer to where I live. And it's also continuous. So you'll hear that a lot with franchises. If you can buy something that's continuous, meaning it's the same, they're adjacent. I do know there are owners that like one's Palm Springs and Laguna Beach. They're not continuous. This is continuous. It's one big territory. And there's a huge advantage to that with referral sources cross over from one to another. Think of it like a Venn diagram almost. And you have referral sources that refer to this area and refer to this area. Well, now it's like we have the whole area. And now we can share caregivers. And there's all these things that we can do if it's continuous. And so for those reasons, continuous, closer to home, good business. Again, like 10 years ago, this is a good opportunity. It was a good business. She's retiring. The lady retired. And so I just felt it was the right time to do it. And it was a process, just like it was 10 years ago. But, in life, you got to think of it like this. How many opportunities do you get to do something when you feel like it's the right opportunity? You could either not do it, which is fine. We're not passing judgment, or you go for it. And I think I've learned as I've gone through this, sometimes you just have to go for it. You have to take those opportunities because they're not going to come along that much. And if I didn't end up taking the opportunity, I would have been fine and happy. But you know what? We have a limited time here on this earth. And if you want to do the most, and by the way, we get an opportunity to help more people. Now we get an opportunity to help people in Pasadena. And that's what we want to do. And that's the mission, right? And that's why we're doing this, is to help people. And so those are some of the reasons why I did it. But it was also a difficult decision. It wasn't easy. None of these things are necessarily, but that was my thought process for it.
Andy, was it a little bit easier this time around because you've already established yourself and as a proven business that's working and growing to get that? Assuming you needed to get another loan to get that new business, or was that something you were able to kind of, umbrella underneath what you're already doing?
So I did a seller note, meaning I just did a private deal with the seller. So I didn't do an
Gotcha.
SBA loan, and that cut down on the timeline. So I'm just paying her back, and
Yeah,
that made things a lot easier. And there's a lot of trust built in there because we
sure.
knew each other. We were neighbors. To answer your question, 10 years ago, I would say I was more nervous about it because I didn't know anything. This time
Yeah,
around, it's like I know the nuts and bolts. I know how this thing works. Even though it's more complicated because now I have two separate businesses, three offices, four territories, I know how to do it. I know how to do it. 10 years ago, I didn't. So I had a lot more confidence this time around that I could do it. And by the way, my marketing sales guy who was in Rancho, I moved over and now he's doing the marketing and sales over in the new territory. So I have like that benefit of the marketing arm doing that. So yeah, different mindset. I've talked to a lot of people about this. So like, is it more nerve wracking or is it more stressful? In a way, yes, because there's more to manage, there's more teams, but I know home care. I know how it
yeah.
works, right? Um,
And with now, since you bought two existing businesses that were within the group, now if you fast forwarded 10, 15 years down the road and you were ready to move on, do you feel like that's the way that this franchise is set up is going to be a pretty easy transition for you to be able to exit if you want to at some point? Or how is that process of, it sounds like there was, the first one was a kind of more traditional, the second one was more personal. Does the franchise make it pretty easy for you to have an exit strategy as well, or is there a lot of meetings and things that they've got to sign off on?
yeah, they'll always have to sign off when you're buying an additional territory. There was a lot of talk with corporate. They have to approve it. They have to look at the numbers. They want to make sure, they had to approve me again to make
Right.
sure that if I bought this business, I wouldn't neglect the Rancho business, right? They want to make sure I'm in good standing and all of that. They're not going to just approve it for anybody because that doesn't do them any good. Then if business fails and they don't get their royalties, it's put on the brand and all that. In terms of succession planning, I always think about that. I think about the people on the team. I think about who has the potential to potentially take it over. In the example of Pasadena, it's a split. So I own 100% of Rancho, and Pasadena Covina, I own 75%. 25% is with the son of the seller. Okay. The son of the seller. He's a 25% minority stake owner. And so Renee wanted to kind of have him as a legacy thing. So that would be a natural fit for me if I sold the percentage to him as an example. Here, I mean, I have someone that's been working for me, the marketing sales guy I've referenced. He would be a great owner. I'm keeping it down a little bit because my office is closed. There's people on the other side of this hallway. We're talking succession planning here. I want to be careful. Yeah, no, absolutely. You think about that. Corporate does have webinars and calls and advice and how to do that because you got to clean your books. You got to make sure if you're going to think about selling, they go back 3 years, right? So got to make sure the books are clean for like 3 years. So if say I think about selling in 5 years from now, okay, 2 years from now, I got to get working on like the books to make sure like they're clean. But that's something that I've definitely thought about more and more. And I was talking to Rob before this or yesterday. This is my last go around with this. I don't think I'm going to purchase that. I think I'm good with this. And so what's my next move going to be? Do I sell two of the territories and keep one or there's more things to play with, so to speak, now that I have four territories. But that's something you think about, and corporate does help you with that. But the most important thing with succession planning is, do you think you have someone who you've worked with that could take it over, that could do it? You have the trust in somebody because I would rather sell to someone that I know that's worked with me than an outside person, for example. And Renee, the seller passed it. She knew me. I was a fellow owner, right? She thought I could lead and mentor her son, right? And so, yeah, I've been thinking about that more and more as I get into this, and probably 2, 3 years from now, I'm going to be thinking about that even more with the books, cleaning the books, and making sure, okay, do I have person or persons in place to possibly do that?
Yeah, that's great. Because we're all at a time where we're making transitions, and we're always, it's like think of life in like 10-year blocks. And you mentioned earlier you have two young boys, and as they get to the point where they're ready to move on, you might be ready to move on to your next chapter or a little bit more relaxing lifestyle. But
Yeah,
it's very interesting because it sounds like they make it pretty easy for you and you've got obviously, even though you're just getting into a new to new territories, you obviously are also thinking long term. So
yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah, for sure.
I guess one of the questions I have is this is not necessarily, specific to, the franchise type business, but for somebody that's made the switch over from corporate world to, a private, privately owned business. Were there any major issues that arose kind of that you weren't expecting or that you hadn't planned for? Or just as a small business owner, any advice to other small business owners how to address and overcome some of these challenges that arise that you just, out of left field?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. I have a couple examples. So 10 years ago, I looked at the financials and then I had a purchase price. We agreed on a purchase price based on the financials, right? Based on a multiplier of like net income, right? And then the first day I'm sitting there and I'm doing the billing. I remember this. I was like doing the math in my head. I'm like, I billed this much this week and I multiplied it by 52. I'm like, wait, how does that come out to the gross revenue I was looking at on the when I was doing the due diligence? And that's a common thing where sometimes what happened, there's a lag period between the time that people sell the business to the time you actually take over. So you iron out an agreement, but then there's like a lag period for the time because you have to get a license. You got to get set up with your bank account. There's a lot of like things to do to actually take over the business. You can't just be like, okay, sell it to me. I'm gonna walk into those doors and own it. There's a gap between the agreement of the purchase agreement. Okay, I agree to sell it to you to the time you actually walk in the door. Say that's call it 2 months, 3 months. Well, what happens those 2, 3 months? Guess what? The sellers that are selling it, what do you think they do psychologically? Yeah, I'm not gonna push as hard. I'm going to take my foot off the gas a little bit. And they might not even mean to, but it's almost like a subconscious thing. Okay, I'm selling this to, and I'm not going to be as buttoned up and tight with this process. Or, you know what? I didn't follow up with this family and they're not happy with services and they're gonna quit. Normally I would have followed up more or had my team follow up more. So what happened was in this case, and then also in this business, we're taking care of old people. They passed away. They had a couple 24/7 cases that passed away. Okay. All of a sudden, the numbers I was looking at here were different than the numbers I got. That was really eye opening for me. And that was a bummer. And I was like, holy crap, I totally overpaid for this? And what am I getting myself into? And I thought I was going to get this revenue and it's this. But you can't let it fester with you. You have to move forward. And we're like, we're going to fix this and do it right. And I understand that that can happen. So I'll just say this as advice for anyone going into a business. And now I'm talking, let's be specific about a resale business, right? Because startup doesn't have any, there's no revenue, right? So with the resale business, I would advise anybody to look at the financial, then build something into the purchase agreement about, well, if it goes down, maybe you could recoup some of it on the price on the back end or something like that. So to answer your question, that was a big surprise. And by the way, with this one, Pasadena, same thing happened. Same thing happened. The hours are a lot lower than they are in Rancho. And the business that I bought should be the same. Should be the same. It's lower. And guess what? They lost 3 24/7 cases. Coincidence. That's a coincidence. Happened in 3 months, but they didn't have any good structure beneath it. So when you lose the 24/7 cases, there wasn't enough business beneath it. So hey, we're working up. There's a lot of upside, right? So that's one thing, financial stuff. I think a second thing is culture. We talk about culture, go back to culture. Like the business, use this example, the expansion that I bought, I'm actually buying 2 offices from Pasadena, Covina. There's one in Covina, one in Pasadena. Rancho, there's 1 office, okay? Guess what? 3 office people are in 1 office, 3 office people are in another office. What does that do to culture and communication? We learned about this in business school a lot. It's not good for it. Everything is done on Microsoft Team meets, chats. Everything is done on chat. Not a lot of talking, connection, and all this. So even though I knew there was 2 offices, I didn't realize the culture of what I was getting into with the new thing. And part of my job is to figure out how to fix that, and that's what I'm working on. So that was a surprise for me, 100%. I didn't think that, and not only that, they were very corporate. So the new business I'm buying was almost like silos. I'll give this example. I was talking to my director of operations the first or second day. We were talking about something related to, I forget what it was. He's like, oh, let me go talk to HR about that. And I said, I had a flashback to my corporate days. Hold on. You mean you want to talk to Rocio? Like we're a small business. We can't be treated like a corporation where you're siloed off. You can't say I'm going to talk to this function. You're talking to a person. This is a small business. That was an example. That was very eye-opening to me, instructive on, okay, I have to make some changes to the culture. And so I would say financial part and then the culture part were 2 huge things that were surprises for me. and things to overcome.
What's funny here, as the Gen X on here, you've got to make a little levity of it. It did remind me as you're telling me that story is the old Dunder Mifflin when they were trying to merge a couple of the offices together, the couple of the exactly what you outlined right there. So adding a little levity to this, but
Yeah.
sorry,
Yeah.
I'll flip it back over to you.
If you're an office of 7 people, you should never say, "Let me talk to HR." Yeah.
Andy, you mentioned mission, and you obviously you're in something that's very impactful to human beings at a time when they're not at the best health of their lives and they're maybe on their final chapter. Can you kind of share if you've had any moments where you're like, wow, what I'm doing really does make a difference? And the people that we have going out to these homes are really, it's almost like a movie kind of episode where you get Driving Miss Daisy kind of a vibe. Have you any stories that kind of resonate with you that come to mind that you're like, man, I love what I do. I'm really helping people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, if Dan was on this call, who does all the visits, all the home visits, he would have so many stories for you. He tells me about the story. We deal with a lot of Alzheimer's and dementia, and he was in there doing a consultation. Consultation is when you meet with the family and they sign up for services. And he knows how to play piano, and he remembers they had a piano in the home, and he was playing piano, and that person with Alzheimer's started crying, right? Because when you have Alzheimer's dementia, there's certain things like music that can trigger in a good way, and memories and all
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
That just comes to mind because he's told me that story. So that's not me. That's what I've heard.
Sure.
But occasionally I do go out and I do meet with the families. Like there's a birthday. I recently celebrated a 100th birthday for a client, and all the family was there and was singing happy birthday, and it was very emotional. And the caregiver was there, and the son of the 100-year-old was just thanking the caregiver for her compassion and the job that she does. And it's a hard job. The caregivers, it's a hard job. It's a messy job. It's difficult. Some of the families we deal with are difficult. Alzheimer's and dementia is very difficult, because they can be in one mood and all of a sudden in another mood. It affects the frontal cortex of the brain. You can make them agitated. The patience they have to do to serve these families. But it was emotional at this birthday party. We're talking about it, and they were talking about the caregiver, and I got choked up. I'm like, this is so meaningful to these families. They develop relationships with the family members, develop relationship with these caregivers, not with me, not with the office staff, with the actual caregivers. And
Sure.
that's when it's a beautiful, beautiful thing, because they become part of their family. And I can't tell you how many times we've lost clients that passed away, and then caregiver will come in and will cry because they've known this family member for 7 years. Been with them 7 years, and they pass away. It's so meaningful to them, and it's so meaningful to the family to have those connections. So I see that as the owner. I wish I could make more visits and see the families more, but I see it. I get the sense. And sometimes, I'll go to an assisted living community because we do work with them. We help their families, and I'll see the folks around. I'll say hi to them, and they always have time for a conversation with you and want to tell a joke. And it should be a wonderful time of life for them. Sadly, it's hard. Oftentimes it's hard, but we want to make them as comfortable and as happy as possible. Our caregivers are the ones that do that. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing to watch happen.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing that. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a question also then, kind of you're talking about the caregivers because, you've been talking primarily about your office staff and so forth, but, your primary business is relating to clients, through caregivers. How does that relationship work in terms of the people, the caregivers you provide? Are you able to provide any kind of, I guess, a little more kind of clarity about like how that relationship's with you and your caregivers and that entire network? Do you tap into an existing network? How do you leverage caregivers?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, I would say, like I just said, they are the most important part because they're interfacing with the families. It's also the most difficult job to keep them engaged with, because if they're not on a regular shift or whatever, a lot of times they'll move on to another agency or they'll go to another job. It's not the highest paying thing in the world. You really have to, as a caregiver, want to do it and care for people. It can't just be a job. It's got to be more than that. And so we try and keep them engaged as much as we can. We try and have pizza in the office, and we'll go out and do visits. Our care managers will do visits, and we try and really keep them engaged as much as possible because they're almost on an island with the family and they're not connected to the office. It's very important to have the office connected to the caregivers. And hiring is difficult. It's really, really difficult because there's a lot of options out there. And so we try and just build a good culture up front. We bring them in. We talk about, okay, this is what it's like to be with Right at Home. And we try and really match them with a family. and really take our time to match them with the right family. We look at personalities, we look at skills, because the families are very particular on what they want. We're not just going to send somebody out there. We're not just going to send a body out there. And so engagement is super important with the mission, and also getting them connected with the families is so important, because once you have that connection, and assuming they're not end of life hospice and they'll be around for a while, it becomes a very powerful thing. I don't know if that answered your question exactly, Rob, but it's difficult. Hiring is a difficult thing in this industry. It's probably the number one most difficult thing. Demand is not as much of an issue. There's always people are getting older and older and older, and increasingly families are living apart from the person that needs the care. So the families can't be the caregivers. They have to hire people. It's getting enough caregivers in place, good caregivers, right, to manage that. And it's a challenging environment because of the pay, because of the competition. You might have a great caregiver come in and they're with the client, but then they pass away, and then we don't have a replacement for that. I hate to say replacement. We don't have another family to fill those hours. The caregiver's like, bye-bye, I'm going to go somewhere else. It's very hard to keep them engaged. One of the advantages of having two offices now, it's like, okay, hey, we don't have a family here. Let us call the other office now. Maybe they have a family that needs help. You can go over there, assuming it's not too long a drive and all that. So does that partially or answer your question a little bit, Rob?
No, it does, because it seems like, obviously, having never been a private business owner myself, that seems to be one of the biggest challenges. Obviously, when you're talking about office staff and so forth, there's the challenges that go along with people that you're around daily. But people from a hiring perspective, the people that are the ones that are actually going to be engaging with the actual end client and that's the most important position in the company. And just being able to manage that relationship, I'm sure it's definitely a challenge.
100%.
Yeah, Andy, I was trying to understand how your business model worked when I was looking through your website, and wasn't sure if the employees were, so all the caregivers that go out to these different families, those are direct employees of you and then the franchise, or are they kind of a
That's correct.
1099 type of thing?
They're not 1099s. They're full on W-2s, W-4 employees, taxes
Sure.
taken out and all that. We hire them. They sign on. Sign an employee agreement. They're not employees of the franchisor. There's no relationship between the franchisor
Sure.
and them. But yeah, they're full employees, and we try and treat them as such, just like the office staff, even though we don't see them as much. Again, that engagement is super, super important.
And with the business model that you guys have, what would you say is your top two biggest expenses that you have monthly or yearly? Is I assume monthly is payroll, and would be your employee, you
Well,
direct.
payroll would be the number one for sure, 100%. Although I'll just say this, it's a good margin business. So whenever you're looking for people listening out there, always think about your margin too, right? And
Sure.
the most basic sense, so keep it simplified. What are the clients paying?
Mm-hmm.
And then what are you billing at? And then what are you paying at? And with us, it's at least 50%, if not more than that, 52, 53, 54%. Now that gets eaten into with workers' comp and insurance and all that. But you want to have that really good margin. Some businesses, the margins are less than that. What you're paying and what you're billing at is much tighter. This is a great business model because people, if they're high need, if they need care, they will pay for it. Because if you have a loved one, if your mom or dad, if they need home care, now I know it's expensive, right? Because insurance generally doesn't. But if you have the resources, or if it's 2 weeks, you're probably going to pay for it because you have to have it. And so we're not taking advantage of it. That's just what the market will bear. So you can really, because I've doubled rates in 10 years. It's almost doubled, right?
Right.
The pay, you got to pay more too. Obviously, we always tell the clients, look, we have to raise your rates. What's the number one reason? So we can pass it off to the caregivers. We want to pay them more. Why? So they can take care of you. So you can provide the best care. So number one is payroll for expenses. And I would say the second biggest expense is probably insurances. It's probably
especially in California, right?
Especially in California, right? California is very pro-employee, not pro-employer. Right. So how do you protect yourself? You got to pay a lot in insurance. And the insurances are workers' comp and liability. Workers' comp is tremendously expensive. We get a lot of claims on workers' comp. And so, employees out there, they fall, they're helping a client, they're transferring from the bed, and then they slip and fall and they hurt that's a workers' comp claim. And that's why you pay a lot of money in insurance to handle those claims, right?
Sure.
And then liability insurance is pretty expensive too. That's more on the client end. If the caregiver's doing something and then transferring the client, same example, with the client slips, the family slips, or the client slips and does something. Okay, well, liability insurance is like a protector of that, more or less. So I would say that's probably number two is insurance. And that's probably common across a lot of businesses, payroll and
Right.
insurance is to protect yourself.
And Andy, and I kind of follow up to that. If I've got my mom is pushing 80 now. She's still fortunately in really good health, but as I've seen her take care of her parents and then go through different stages. If is there an average for someone actually going to a facility versus being at home? And then how much less would you say would it be 60% to kind of have that in-home care of what it would cost for them to go to an actual facility? Or what are the numbers on that? Do you have a ballpark that you
Yeah,
could
I
share?
mean, I would say it really varies a lot because the places you can go really range. There's high-end facilities, you know. And look at it like there's home, then assisted living, then you go to like memory care or skilled. So there's like a progression sometimes, right? Our goal is to keep
Right.
them to age in place, age at home, because most people want to stay in their home. I would say cost-wise, it really does depend on the facility. I would say, I don't have the exact number for you. I would say it's fairly comparable home care to living at an assisted living. By the way, we have some families that have a lot of money and they bring us in with the assisted living. So they're paying for the assisted living, but assisted living, it means assisted. It doesn't mean one-on-one. It's assisted, meaning you got a resident nurse that walks the hallways and has maybe 30 families they're looking for. Home care is one-on-one. So families with a lot of money bring us in to supplement that because actually, if we didn't, the assisted living would say they can't stay here. It's not appropriate for them to stay here. They got to go to somewhere where there's more round the clock because we don't have the staff and the resources. Let's bring in right at home to supplement that care with the family. We have 5 to 10 families like that where, you know, they have long-term care insurance, great policies, they have trusts, and they have the resources to do that. Not everyone can do that. Most people would prefer to stay in their home. Some people like the assisted livings because it's more of a social thing and that's important. But I don't have numbers, Chad, on the actual percentage of costs. It really does vary because also home care varies depending on the hours. Some families just need 20 hours a week. Not they're able to like do their activities of daily living already, but they just need a little help with certain things. A little help with showering and bathing. Most part, they're pretty independent. Some need round the clock care. And so it's very variable, the costs for home care because there's all these different needs. And it's very variable, the cost for an assisted living because some are super high end and super expensive. You walk in there, it's like the lobby's like the Titanic, right? It looks like
Right.
horrible, like these staircases. And then some you walk into, you're like, I don't know if I'd want my parents here, And
Yeah.
so it just varies. But all things being equal, people love staying in their homes. I mean, who wouldn't? Rob,
Absolutely.
your mom
Yeah.
is living at home, right? She's 95, she's living at home, right? Yeah.
And so, yeah, we're going through this right now with her. Luckily, she wants to ride this out at home as long as she can and everything. So, and God bless, the ability to be able to do it. So, we'll
Yeah.
see.
Yeah. You to stay at home as you go by. Okay. All of a sudden you start to bring in medical equipment. You need a hospital bed, maybe with railings. You need to bring in a Hoyer lift. You start bringing out and it adds up. But some people just are like, I'm comfortable here. I will bring in the resources to do it to stay at home. This is a personal decision.
And Andy, does the government get involved? Like, are you able to pass any of these? Is the clients able to pass any of that along to insurance, or is that kind of a tough gray area to kind of navigate?
Yeah, I would say in general, you're talking about home care, home health care. When you hear home health care, that's medical. When you hear home care, that's non-medical. We're non-medical, meaning if
Gotcha.
a client has a wound, we can't do wound care. Okay, we can clean around it, but we can't do actual wound care. We can't do physical therapy. We can't administer morphine as examples. So because it's non-medical, generally speaking, insurance doesn't cover it because it's non-medical. That being said, things, long-term care insurance, a lot of people, it's getting more popular. A lot of people have LTC, long-term care insurance. Probably 20% of our clients have LTC, and it's wonderful because it's paid for. Now, there's different policies. Some get 100 hours a week, some get 20 hours a week. It just depends. And it's a wonderful way to supplement it because it is expensive. It's private pay for the most part. And then there's government resources that we partner with where they subsidize the care. So they send us an authorization. Mrs. Smith, you're approved. So right at home, you're approved with this agency, and she's approved for 20 hours of care a week for 6 months. Go ahead and provide the care. It's fully paid for. That's governmental money that comes through the government. down, pass through home care. Generally speaking, Medicare, Medi-Cal does not cover this stuff, right? Because it's not medical. So the general insurance you're talking about is not.
Right.
There are different areas to get the funds subsidized, basically, and paid for.
Well, Chad,
How big are these offices that you have as far as numbers of, I know you have the smaller internal office staff, but you're wider reaching. Does it range from 10 people to 100 people? Obviously, it's certain, how many families you have, but on average, how many employees are you managing
Yeah.
if you have two different locations?
Yeah. So one office, well, I'm just talking about office staff. One's 5 and then one's 7. That's 12. And the caregivers varies. I mean, the Rancho probably has 100 caregivers on staff.
Wow.
Pasadena Covina probably has about 80. And so we're talking about 200 total employees. So yeah, I mean, it can be a lot to manage, but if you have the systems in place to manage everything, it can run pretty smoothly. As long as the relationship, again, I go back to a relationship between caregiver and client. If that is good, that helps so much. If it's
Sunshine and rainbows, right?
sunshine and rainbows, and if not, it's the opposite of that. Whatever the opposite of that.
Right on.
hey, Andy, I know that we appreciate your time here, and I know we're going to start pushing up on the time limit here. But kind of as we start to close things down here, I guess one of the questions that I had, you know, what recommendations, or do you have any recommendations for our listeners that that might be thinking about following a similar path as you? Any recommendations for somebody that might be making that big leap to more of a traditional job into something more of a privately owned business? Any thoughts, recommendations? Any guidance that you might be able to provide?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, I would say if the right opportunity presents itself, go for it, because it was the best decision I ever made. And for all the reasons kind of we touched upon, flexibility, financial security, being your own boss, doing something that has meaning. And I would say, I'll start with that. I would say the number one thing is if you're looking for the next thing, right? And you don't feel like you have meaning in your corporate job. And I didn't feel like I had meaning. I wasn't really doing anything that was impacting anybody. To be honest, I really wasn't. That can be soul sucking. It could be slow over time, and then all of a sudden you realize time's passed you by, and like, I want to do something, find something that has meaning, and be smart about it. Do the due diligence. Take your time. If you can afford to stay at your job and do it like I did, do that. So be safe about it. Don't be reckless. Do your due diligence. But I think owning a business is a wonderful thing, and for all the reasons I've said, I love managing people, love managing teams. I love empowering them. And that's hard to do in corporate sometimes. In corporate, you're looking over your shoulder all the time. God, I got to take my son to this doctor appointment. I'm going to miss this meeting. This is an important meeting. I needed to show my face because they're going to be asking why wasn't Andy Cohen at this meeting? And I had that, so thankfully I had the kids after the business, right? But I tell my wife, for the situation now, as I was at Warner Brothers, it would have been really hard to make all the appointments for the kids. Or I would have just done it, and then I would have been worrying about looking over my shoulder, right? I'm being evaluated and all that. So I think you have to look internally and think about what is going to make you happy and satisfied and fulfilled in life. And then let it flow from there. Let it flow from there. Start doing the research. Take it high level at first. What is going to be satisfying and fulfilling? It might be difficult. That's okay. And then finding the pathway to get you to that. I can't give advice on the pathway other than do your due diligence. The right opportunity finds itself. Hey, go for it. Try and keep don't do anything reckless, but keep the mission in mind. What's the mission? What's the ultimate purpose about what I'm trying to do?
No, I like that.
Love that.
That's great advice.
Yeah, it's great. The one thing that we always like to do with our guests, and I don't know if Rob shared that with you pre podcast, but we'd like to find out if there's any impactful books that you've read recently or in the past that, like I just read one, we just did a podcast on, it's called Die With Zero by Bill Perkins. Is there any books where, they're either, motivational or just things that impacted you either back in the day or in grad school or more recent?
Well, you know what? It reminds me. So I believe, and Rob, you might keep me honest here, the first book we were assigned, I'm gonna say The Road Less Traveled by J. Scott Peck. I'm gonna say that.
I know.
And I believe, Rob, keep me honest, Dr. Strom assigned us. I remember this. We got in the fall. We got accepted in the fall. He gave us homework before that. We got book reading in the summer before that. I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, We have homework already. We haven't even started. And the first book,
Yeah, I didn't have Dr. Strom, so I guess I got off easy for the
you did, right?
pre-homework.
So the first book he assigned, I remember this was The Road Less Traveled. I never read it. Like, what is this book? This doesn't this doesn't feel like a businessy type of book, right? It's not from a CEO or I mean, I don't know what he did, but and The Road Less Traveled, I don't know if you've read it, but it's all about your whole thing and it's about purpose. We're just talking about purpose and your mission, overcoming challenges and getting in touch with yourself and being okay taking chances. And it's all about because I'll say this in business, like it's important to have IQ, but a lot of people are smart. It's more important to have EQ, emotional intelligence, right? You're able to lead people. And The Road Less Traveled, I haven't read it in years, but it really impacted me because it talked a lot about the leadership and getting in touch with yourself and spirituality and love. And these are all things that you can bring to business. And so I would recommend that. And that it happened to be the first book we were assigned, and it still
That's
resonates.
great.
All these 30 years later, The Road Less Traveled.
Right on.
There's other
Right
books
on.
here and there. I've read some of the Malcolm Gladwell books, which are great. David and Goliath has also got underdogs in this, but I'm going to say Road Less Traveled. I'm going to keep it at that. Road Less
Right on.
Traveled.
Right on.
My final answer. Hey, Andy, we'll throw that up on our website. So one of the things, we have a section on our website specifically for recommended reading and so forth. So we'll definitely add that to the list.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Any other
Anything-
cool on a quick sidebar, since we like to keep it fun and light here, any fun Hollywood stories, premieres, actors, actresses you've met, any thing that's on your wall of fame of your memory bank
Yeah, I mean,
back in the Hollywood days?
I would say, no, I'll just preface this. Being in home entertainment, I was really away of the sexy. I was not near the sexy side. I didn't go to
Sure,
premieres.
no, I
was
get it. I was in that
home
space too.
entertainment side. But occasionally there was an event where we would do like a box set, a 75th anniversary box set or whatever for a big actor or whatever. Then I might go to the premiere like event for it. Okay.
Sure.
So my number one story, my number one person I met, we were doing so let's see, this was probably in 2010. Dirty Harry came out in 1970. So we're doing a 40th anniversary box set for Dirty Harry. You can probably guess who the celebrity is going to be. So we were doing a
I
40th.
think I've heard of that guy once or twice.
We're doing a 40th anniversary for Dirty Harry box set. And then there was a screening at the Cinerama Dome in Hollywood or whatever.
Yeah.
So you go to the screening and then you have like the box set out in the like lobby, and then there's a step and repeat. And then my boss's boss or my boss, Mil Paso was Clint Eastwood's production company with Warner Brothers. And he knew Clint Eastwood, my boss's boss, because they worked together, and Clint Eastwood had input on specifics in the box set. And so I met him. So I was in the lobby and I was with him and he introduced me to him. And I just remember he is probably 6'4", and he's got huge arms and huge he's larger than life. I mean, you see him on screen. He actually is, usually like you see an actor
Tom
and
Cruise?
then you see him over Tom Cruise, right? He's 5'7". He is legit 6'4", hands huge. How you doing? Or something, real quick, very polite. That was it. And I always remember, okay, look, if I'm going to meet a celebrity, he's probably the best one out there in terms of icon status,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's like he's, still kicking, 95
cool.
years old. It's amazing. But
Yeah.
that's probably my number one meetup, I would say. Everything else can't compare. It's Clint Eastwood.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Very cool.
That's awesome. Well, I'll tell you what, as we close things out today, obviously, I just want to thank you, Andy, for joining us. Hopefully, we provided our audience some valuable insights. And for those watching or listening, we look forward to hearing any of your thoughts, recommendations on future topics, or just general feedback through our website at yournbt.com. So with that, I hope everybody has a great week, and good luck out there finding your next big thing.
Thank you,
All right.
Andy. We greatly appreciate it.
You got it. Take care, guys. That was fun.